This is the second chapter of history of medieval India, Satish Chandra. So it is Northern India, age of three empires, 800 to 1000. After the decline of Harsha Empire in the 7th century, a number of large states arose in North India, the Deccan and the South India. Unlike the Gupta and the Harsha Empire in the North India, none of the other kingdoms in North India were able to bring the entire Ganga Valley under its control. The Ganga Valley, with its population and other resources, was the basis on which the Gupta rulers and the Harsha had been able to extend their control over Gujarat, which with its rich seaport and manufacturers was important for overseas trade. Malwa and Rajasthan were the essential link between the Ganga Valley and Gujarat. This defined the geographical limit of an empire in North India. In South India, the Cholas were able to bring the Krishna, Kaveri, and the Godavari and the Kaveri Delta under their control. This was the basis of their supremacy in South India. Last states arose in North India and the Deccan between AD 750 and 1000. These were the Pala Empire, which dominated eastern India till the middle of the 9th century. The Pratihara Empire, which dominated western India and the upper Gangetic Valley till the middle of the 10th century, and the Rashtrakuta Empire, which dominated the Deccan and also controlled territories in North and South India at various times. Each of this empire, although they fought among themselves, provided stable conditions of life over large areas, extended agriculture, built ponds and canals, and gave patronage to art and letters, including temples. Of the three, the Rashtrakuta Empire lasted the longest. It was not only the most important empire of the time, but also acted as a bridge between North and South India in economic as well as the cultural manners. The struggle for domination in North India, the Palas. The period following the death of Harsha was a period of political confusion. For some times, Lala Ditya, the ruler of Kashmir, brought the Punjab under his control and even controlled Kanuj, which since the day of Harsha was considered the symbol of sovereignty of the North India, a position which Delhi was to acquire later. Control of Kanuj also implied control to the upper Gangetic Valley and its rich resources in trade and agriculture. Lala Ditya even invaded Bengal or Gaunt and killed its reigning king. But his power wanted with the rise of the Palas and the Gujarat Pratiharas. The Pala and the Pratihara clashed with each other for the control of the area extended from Banaras to South Bihar, which again had rich resource and well-developed imperial traditions. The Pratiharas also clashed with the Rashtrakuta of the Deccan. The Pala Empire was founded by Gopala probably in AD 750 when he was elected king by the notable men of the area to end the anarchy prevailing there. Gopala was not born in the high, much less a royal family, his father probably being a soldier. He unified Bengal under his control and even brought Magadha, Bihar under his control. Gopala was succeeded in AD 770 by his son Dharmapala, who ruled till AD 810. His reign was marked by the two-party struggle between the Palas, Pratiharas and the Rashtrakuta for the control of Kanuj and North India. The Pratihara ruler advanced upon Gaunt, but before a decision could be taken, the Pratihara ruler were defeated by the Rashtrakuta ruler Dhruva and was forced to seek refuge in the desert of Rajasthan. Dhruva then returned to the Deccan. This left the field free for Dharmapala, who occupied Kanauj and led a grand darbar which was attended by vassal rulers from Punjab, eastern Rajasthan, etc. We are told that the rule of Dharmapala extended up to the furthest limit of the India in the northwest and perhaps included Malwa and Berar. Apparently, this implied that the ruler of this areas accepted the suzerainty of Dharmapala. The trumpful career of Dharmapala may be placed between AD 792 and 800. Dharmapala could not, however, consolidate his power in North India. The Pratihara power revived under Nagavata II. Dharmapala fell back but was defeated under Mangro. Bihar and modern eastern Uttar Pradesh remained the backbone of contention between the Palas and the Pratiharas. However, Bihar, in addition to Bengal, remained under the control of the Palas for the most of the time. Failure in the north compelled the Pala ruler to turn their energy in other direction. Devapala, the son of Dharmapala, who succeeded to the throne in AD 810 and ruled for 40 years, extended his control over Pragjotishpura, Assam, and parts of Orissa. Probably a part of modern Nepal was also brought under Pala suzerainty. Thus, for about 100 years, from the middle of the 8th to middle of 9th century, the Pala rule dominated eastern India. For some time, their control extended up to Varanasi. Their power is attested to by a Arab merchant Suleiman who visited India in the middle of 9th century and wrote an account of it. He calls the Pala kingdom Ruhaman or Dharma, short for Dharmapala, and says that the Pala ruler was at war with his neighbor, the Pratihara and the Rashtrakuta, but his troops were more numerous than his adversaries. He tells us that it was customary for the Pala king to be accompanied by the force of 50,000 elephants, and that 10,000 to 15,000 men in the army were employed in filling and washing clothes. Even if these figures may be exaggerated, we can assume that the Pala had a large military force at their disposal. But we do not know whether they had a large standing army or whether their force consisted largely of feudal levies. Information about the Pala is also provided to us by Tibetan chronology. Although these were written in the 17th century, according to this, the Pala rulers were great patrons of Buddhist learning and religion. The Nalanda University, which had been famous all over the eastern world, was revived by Dharmapala, and 200 villages were set up apart for meeting its expense. He also founded the Vikramashila University, which became second only to Nalanda in fame. It was located on the top of hill on the bank of the Ganga in Magadha, amidst pleasant surrounding. The Palas built many viharas in which a large number of Buddhist monks lived. The Pala rulers also had close cultural relation with Tibet. The noted Buddhist scholars Santarikshis and Dipankar were invited to Tibet, and they introduced a new form of Buddhists there. As a result, many Tibetan Buddhists flocked to the University of Nalanda and Vikramashila for studies. Although the Palas were supporters of Buddhism, they also extended their patronage to Shaivism, Palas, and Vaishnavism. They also grant to large number of Brahmins from North India who flocked to Bengal. Their settlements help in the extension of cultivation in the area and the transformation of any pastoralist and food gatherer to settle down to cultivation. The growing prosperity of Bengal helped in extending trade and cultural contact with countries of Southeast Asia, Burma, Malaya, Java, Sumatra, etc. The trade with Southeast Asia was very profitable and added greatly to the prosperity of the Pala Empire and led to the incursions of gold and silver from this country into Bengal. The powerful Sailendra dynasty, which was Buddhist in faith, which ruled over Malay, Java, Sumatra and the neighbouring islands, sent many embassies to the Pala court and sought permission to build a monastery at Nalanda, and also requested the Pala ruler Devapala to endow 5 villages for its upkeep. The request was granted and bear testimony to the close relation between the two emperors. Sorry. Okay, now the Pratiharas. The Pratiharas who ruled over Kanuj for a long time are also called Gujrara Pratiharas. Most scholars consider that they originated from the Gujrara, who were pastoralistic and fighters like the Jat. The Pratihara established a series of principalities in central and eastern Rajasthan. They clashed with the Rashtrakuta for the control of Malwa and Gujarat, and later for Kanuj, which implied control of Upper Ganga Valley. The Pratiharas, who first had their capital at Binmala, gained prominence under Nagabhata I, who offered stout resistance to the Arab ruler of Sindh, who were trying to encroach on Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Punjab, etc. The Arab made a big thrust towards Gujarat, but were defeated by the Chalukya ruler by Gujarat in 1738. Although small Arab incursions continued, the Arabs ceased to be a threat thereafter. The efforts of the early Pratihara ruler to extend their control over the upper Ganga Valley and Malwa were defeated by the Rashtrakuta ruler Dhruva and Gopala III. In 1790 and again in 806 to 807, the Rashtrakuta defeated the Pratiharas and they withdrew. The Rashtrakuta defeated the Pratiharas and they withdrew to the Deccan, leaving the field free for the Palas. Perhaps the main interest of the Rashtrakuta was the domination of Malwa and Gujarat. The real founder of the Pratihara Empire and the greatest ruler of the dynasty was Bhoja. We do not know how much about the early life of Bhoja or when he ascended the throne. He built the empire and by about AD 836 he had recovered Kanuj, which remained the capital of Pratihara Empire for almost a century. Bhoja tried to extend his sway in the east, but he was defeated and checkmated by the Pala rulers Devapala. He then turned towards central India and Deccan and Gujarat. This led to revival of the struggle with the Rashtrakuta. In a sanguinary battle on the bank of Narmada, Bhoja was able to retain his control over the considered part of Malwa and some part of Gujarat, but he could progress no further in the Deccan. Hence, he turned his attention to the north again. According to any inscription, his territory exceeded to the west side of the river Sutlej. Arab travelers tell us that the Pratihara rulers had the best cavalry in India. Import of horses from Central Asia and Arab was an important item of India's trade at that time. Following the death of Devapala and the weakening of the Pala Empire, Bhoja also extended his empire in the east. The name of Bhoja is famous in legends, perhaps the adventures of Bhoja in the earlier part of his life, his gradual reconquest of his lost empire and his final recovery of Kanuj struck the imagination of his contemporaries. Bhoja was a devotee of Vishnu and adopted the title of Adivarha, which has been found inscribed in some of his coins. He is sometimes called Mir Bhoja to distinguish him from Bhoja Paramara of Ujjain, who ruled a little later. Bhoja probably died in about 885. He was succeeded by his son, the Mahendrapala I. Mahendrapala, who ruled till about 908 to 909, maintained the empire of Bhoja and extended it over Magadha and North Bengal. His inscriptions have also been found in Katewara, East Punjab and Awadh. Mahendrapala fought a battle with the king of Kashmir but had to yield to him some of the territories in the Punjab won by Bhoja. The Pratiharas thus dominated North India for over 100 years from the 9th century to the middle of the 10th century. Al-Masood, a native of Baghdad who visited Gujarat in 1915 and 16, testified to the great power and prestige of Pratihara ruler and the vastness of their empire. So, who visited? Al-Masud. Okay. He also caused the Gujrara Pratihara kingdom Al-Zuzar, a corrupt form of Gujrara, and the king Bahur, probably a mispronunciation of Adi Varha, the title used by Boja, although Boja had died by that time. Al-Masudi says that the empire of Zuzur had 180,000 villages, cities and rural areas, and was about 2,000 kilometers in length and 2,000 kilometers in breadth. The king's army had 4 divisions, each consist of 7 lakh to 9 lakh men. With the army of the north, he fights against the ruler of Multan and other Muslims who align themselves with them. The army of the south fought against the Rashtrakuta and that of the east against the Palas. He had only 22,000 elephants trained for war, but the best cavalry of any king in the country. The Pratihara were patrons of learning and literature. The great Sanskrit poet and dramatic Chandrasekhar lived in his court. At the court of the Mahipala, a grandson of Bhoja. The Pratiharas also embellished Kanuj with many fine buildings and temple. During the 8th and 9th century, many Indian scholars went with embassies to the court of the Caliph at Baghdad. These scholars introduced Indian science, especially mathematics, algebra, and medicine, to the Arab world. We do not know the names of the Indian kings who sent them these embassies. The Pratihara were well known for their hostility of the Arab rulers of Sindh. Despite this, it seemed that the movement of scholars and goods between India and West Asia continued even during this period. Between 1915 and 1918, the Rashtrakuta king Indra III again attacked Kanuj and devastated the city. This weakened the Pratihara Empire, and Gujarat probably passed into the hand of Rashtrakuta, for Al-Masudi tells us that the Pratihara Empire had no access to sea. Okay, no access to sea. The loss of Gujarat, which was the hub of the overseas trade and main outlet of the North Indian goods to West Asian countries, was another blow to Pratiharas. Another Rashtrakuta ruler, Krishna III, invaded North India in about 963 and defeated the Pratihara ruler. This was followed by the rapid dissolution of the Krishna III invaded. Rapid dissolution of the Pratihara empire. This is the map. So this is the Pala region, and this is Gujrara and Pratiharas, Rashtrakutas. So Kanuj, where is Kanuj here? Kanuj is somewhere here. So it should be somewhere here. They are not in the name. So while the Palas and the Pratiharas were now we'll look into the Rashtrakutas. While the Palas and the Pratiharas were ruling over North India, the Deccan was being ruled by the Rashtrakuta, a remarkable dynasty which produced a long line of warriors and able administrators. The kingdom was founded by Danti Durga, who set up his capital at Manya Khet or Malkhind near modern Sholapur. The Rashtrakuta soon dominated the entire region of northern Maharashtra. They also engaged with the Pratihara for the overlordship of Gujarat and Malwa, as we have seen above. Although these raids did not result in the extension of Rashtrakuta Empire to the Ganga Valley, they brought a rich plunder and added to the fame of the Rashtrakuta. The Rashtrakuta also fought constantly against the Eastern Chalukyas. Eastern Chalukyas of Vengi in modern Andhra Pradesh, and in the south against the Pallavas of Kanchi and the Pandyas of Madurai. Probably the greatest Rashtrakuta ruler were Govinda III and Amogha Varsha. After the successful expedition against Nagabhatta of Kanuj and and the annexation of Malwa, Govinda III turned to the south. We are told in an inscription that Govinda terrified the Kerala Pandya and the Chola kings and caused the Pallavas to wither. The king, the the Ganga of Karnataka, who became dissatisfied through baseness, were bound down with fetters and met with death. The king of Lanka and his minister, who had been neglected of their own interest, were captured and brought over as prisoners to Halapur. Two statues of the Lord of Lanka were carried to Maniket and installed like pillars of victory in front of a Shiv temple. Amoghavarsha ruled for 64 years, but to temperament he preferred the pursuit of religion and literature of war. He also himself an author and is credited with writing the first Karnataka book on poetics. He was a great builder and he is said to have built the capital city Manya Khet and so as to excel the city of Indra. There were many rebellions in the far-flung Rashtrakuta Empire under Amoghavarsha. They could be barely contained and began afresh after his death. His grandson Indra III re-established the empire after the death of Manipala and the sack of Kanuj in 1915. Indra III was the most powerful ruler of this time. Okay. So he was the most powerful ruler. Okay. According to Al-Masud, who visited India at that time, the Rashtrakuta king Balhar or Baraj was the greatest king of India, and most of the Indian rulers accepted his sovereignty and respected his envoys. He possessed large armies and innumerable elephants. Krishna III was the last in the line of brilliant rulers. He was engaged in a struggle after the Paramaras of Malwa and the eastern Chalukyas of Vengi. Excuse me. He also launched a campaign against the Chola ruler of Tanuj, who had supplanted the Pallavas of the Kanchi. Krishna III defeated the Chola king Parantak I and annexed the northern part of the Chola Empire. He then pressed down the Rameshwaram and set up a pillar of victory there and built a temple. After his death, all his opponents united against his successor. The Rashtrakuta capital, Malkand, was sacked and burnt in 1972. This marked the end of Chola Empire. Okay. The Rashtrakuta rule in the Deccan thus lasted for almost 200 years till the end of the 10th century. The Rashtrakuta rulers were tolerant in their religion views and patronized not only Shaivism and Vaishnavism but Jainism as well. The famous rock-cut temple of Shiva at Ellora was built by one of the Rashtrakuta king Krishna I in the 9th century. His successor Amoghavarsha is said to have been a Jain, but he also patronized other faiths. The Rashtrakuta allowed Muslim traders to settle and permit Islam to be preached in their dominions. We are told that Muslims had their own headman and had large mosques for their daily prayers in many of the coastal towns in Rashtrakuta Empire. This tolerant policy helped to promote foreign trade, which enriched the Rashtrakuta. The Rashtrakuta king were great patroners of arts and letters. In their court, we find not only Sanskrit scholars but also poets and others who wrote in Prakrit and in Abarsmala. The so-called corrupt language, which were the forerunner of various modern Indian language. The great Abarsma poet Savambu and his son probably lived at the Rashtrakuta court. So it's now political idea and organization. The system of administration in the Indies Empire was based on the ideas and practice of Gupta Empire, Harsha Kingdom in the north and the Chalukya in the Deccan. As before, the monarch was the center of all the affair. He was the head of the administration as well as the commander-in-chief of armed forces. He sat in the magnificent darbar. Squadron of infantry and cavalry were stationed in the courtyard. Captured war elephant and horses were paraded before him. He was attended by royal chamberlains who regulated the coming and going of vessel chiefs, feudatories, ambassadors, and or other high officers who regularly waited on the king. The king also dispensed justice. The court was not only a center of political affair and justice but culture life as well. Dancing girl and skilled musician attended the court. Women of the king's household also attended the darbar on festive occasion. In the Rashtrakuta Empire, according to Arab writers, women did not veil their face. The king's position was generally hereditary. Thinkers of the time emphasized absolutely loyalty and obedience to the king because of the insecurity of the times. Wars were frequent between kings and their vassals. While kings strove to maintain law and order within their kingdom, their arms rarely extended far enough. Vassal rulers and autonomous chiefs often limited the area of the direct administration of the king. Although kings adopted his sounding titles such as Maharajadi Raja, Param Bhattaraka, etc., and claimed to the Chakravartini or supreme of all Indian rulers. A contemporary writer, Medathi, thinks that it was the right of an individual to bear arms in order to defend himself against thieves and assassins. He also thinks that it was right to oppose an unjust king. Thus, the extreme view of royal rights and privilege put forward mainly in the Puranas was not accepted by all the thinkers. The rules about succession were not rigidly fixed. The eldest son often succeeded, but there are many instances where the eldest son had to fight his younger brothers and sometimes lost to them. Thus, the Rashtrakuta ruler Dhruva and Govinda IV deposed their elder brother. Sometimes ruler designated the elder son or another favorite son as their Yuvraj or successor. In the case, the Yuvraj stayed at the capital and helped in the task of administration. Younger sons were sometimes appointed provisional governors. Princesses were rarely appointed to government posts, but we do have an instance where the Rashtrakuta Prince Chandro Balbe, a daughter of Amogavarsha I, administered the Raichur dope for some time. Kings were generally advised by a number of ministers. The ministers were chosen by the king, generally from leading family. Their position was often hereditary. Thus, in case of Pala kings, we hear that the Brahmin family supplied 4 successive chief ministers to Dharmapala and his successor. In such cases, the minister could become very powerful. Although we hear of a number of departments of the central government, we do not know how many of them were there and how they worked. From epigraphy and literary record, it appears that in almost every kingdom there was a minister of correspondence, which including foreign affairs, a revenue minister, treasurer, chief of the armed force, chief justice, and purohit. More that one post could be combined in one person, and perhaps one of the minister was considered the chief or the leading minister or on whom the king learned more than the others. All the ministers except the Purohita were expected to lead military campaign as well as what called upon to do so. We also hear of officials of royal household. Since the king was the fountainhead of all power, some of the officers of household became very powerful. The armed forces were very important for the maintenance and expansion of the empire. We have already cited evidence from Arab travelers that the Pala, Pratihara, and Rashtrakuta king had large and well organized infantry and cavalry, and large number of war elephants. Elephants were supposed to be the element of strength and were greatly prized. The large number of elephant was maintained by the Kapala king. Large number of horses were imported both by Rashtrakuta and the Pratihara king by sea from the Arabs and West Asia and over land from Kursan and Central Asia. The Pratihara kings are believed to have had the finest cavalry in the country. There are no reference to war chariots which had fallen out of use. Some of the kings, especially the Rashtrakuta, had a large number of forts. They were garrisoned by special troops and had their own independent commanders. The infantry consists of regular and irregular troops and of levies provided by the vassal chiefs. The regular troops were often hereditary and sometimes drawn from the different regions of all over India. Thus, the Pala infantry consists of soldiers from Malwa, Kasa, Assam, late some South Gujarat and Karnataka. The Pala kings and perhaps the Rashtrakuta had own natives, but we do not know how much about their strength and organization. The empire consists of area administered directly and areas ruled over by the vassal chiefs. The latter were autonomous as far as their internal affairs were concerned and had a general obligation of loyalty, paying a fixed tribute and supplying the quota of troops to the overlord. Sometimes a son of vassal chief was required to stay in the attendance of the overlord to guard against rebellion. The vassal chief were required to attend the darbar of the overlord on special occasion, and sometimes they were required to marry one of their daughters to the overlord or to one of his sons. But the vassal chiefs